talking about two people eating at the same table, and one is eating milk and one is eating dairy. So what is the halacha if a person wishes to eat dairy alone? He's by himself, but there's also meat on the table. According to the Chochmas Adam, remember the Chochmas Adam is the Chaye Adam, and the Chochmas Adam is the part on Yoredeya. The Chaye Adam was the part of Orachai. So according to Chochmas Adam, as the concern that one may eat from the food of another is not relevant here. So it's permitted. So if you're by yourself and you're eating a cheese sandwich, and there happens to be a piece of meat on the table, it's not prohibited. But the Haflah forbids eating dairy as well, and explains that it's only permitted where two people do not know each other, since the other person will remind him not to do so if he wishes to eat his food. But here there's no one who will remind him not to consume the meat at the same time as the dairy. The Yalkut Yosef holds, though, that in this case, if one also appoints a shomer, then it's permitted to eat dairy there if one also places a sign. So he says a shomer, before we said a shomer would not be effective, but with one person, a shomer would be effective to allow you to eat dairy if there's meat on the table. Now, what if someone ate meat within 6 hours? Is he permitted to sit at a table with somebody else eating dairy? Or are we concerned that he might come inadvertently to eat some dairy? So the Pri Megadim writes that although some poskim are stringent, are machmir, the practical halacha is that one may be lenient. So if you're within your 6-hour period after eating meat, you can sit down at a table where somebody's eating dairy. Kosov b'shut Beit Yaakov, this is the Pri Megadim. The misha ochel basar shetzarich lishos sheis shos lo yeshev etzel misha ochel gvina shema yoshit lo. So he brings the Beis Yaakov who says not to do it. But Velora Isi Nizorim Bezeh. The Pri Megadim says, I don't see that people are careful with this. Gamu Gzeira L'Gzeira. Kulahan Lo Gazrida. The whole issue of 6 hours is a Gzeira. The whole issue of not eating at the same table with the person eating milk and dairy is also Gzeira. So we're making a Gzeira on top of Gzeiras, so he permits that. Now, what about, according to Shulchan Aruch, it's permitted to place a pot, a small container of meat, together with another container of dairy, and you can put both of those in a large container. Says the Shulchan Aruch, muter litein b'toch teva, kad shel basar, eitzel shel chol. That in a big box, you could put a container of meat and a container of milk. I mean, people do that when they go home from the market. And they put a container of meat, they're closed. So that's based on this Shulchan Aruch. The Taz explains why there's no concern for mixing meat and dairy here. Says the Taz, Muter litem b'toch teva, the Bossor im Chalav zehiri inshi, shelo yipol mizeh lezeh. People are careful, and they'll make sure that the meat will not drop onto Chalav or vice versa. But the Ramah writes that ideally one should avoid doing so unless absolutely necessary. But the Shach limits this chumrah of the Ramah only to foods that are open, not closed in a container. So if you have a container that's open, that has meat in it, and a container of milk that has milk in it, but it's closed, but they're open, then you should not put those two things in the same container. If the foods are covered, though, it seems according to the Shach, it is permitted to place them next to each other inside a storage utensil. Based on these makorot, it is permitted to place meat and dairy foods next to each other inside a refrigerator. Or is it? Is it permitted? So according to Shulchan Aruch, it seems that it should always be permitted, as long as they are in separate containers. But according to the Ramon Shach, it should be forbidden lechatchila unless the containers are sealed. The Yalkut Yosef therefore rules that for Sfardim, one may place meat and dairy into containers into the refrigerator, even if they're not covered. Though he adds that it is proper to cover at least one of the containers. But for Ashkenazim, we forbid l'chatchila to do it unless the containers are sealed. Says the Yalkut Yosef, Mitzad adin muter l'chatchila laniach mitzorchei mozen b'makarer, kli sheyesh bo Tzurba Bossor, etzel kli sheyesh bo B'Chalav. Ve'in lochush l'shem yapol mitavshil Bossor toch ha'chala. Or lehefach, shekol ish nizar b'zeh. Or the vice versa, because people are careful. Shelo yiplu mizeh al zeh. The kol shekain should be the eved. Means you didn't do it l'chatchila, but it ended up that way. Iminiach echad el hasheni eino osir. Shein choshishin shem enafel me'echad l'shem. Shein muter laniach kli. B'Chalav, it's a kli sheyesh bo melach. We also don't worry that it's going to fall into the salt and you're going to have a problem with the salt. The mashi tar laniach b'makar mitzarchi Bossor liad mitzarchi Chalav. Ein a rock, ima metzarchi mechusim. You have to be covered. Eladas maran, according to Shulchan Aruch, yesh la'akel b'zeh. Gam im ha'mitzarchi megulim, even if they're open. He says at least cover one of them. So the Sefer HaKashrus rules for Ashkenazim that one may place closed containers of meat and dairy next to each other in general, but warns of specific concerns within a refrigerator of which a person needs to be aware of. Says the Sefer HaKashrus, muter laniach zeh b'tzad zeh, kli or arizah skurim etev, sheyesh b'tocham chavir psari. You can put in the refrigerator side by side, something milk, something dairy, as long as they're in containers that are closed, afilu shneim b'kufsa achat, even if they're in the same box, or gabi oto midaf, or the same shelf. But yesh livdok, shem skurim, or mechusim etev. Just got to make sure that they're sealed. Ule'ini mekarer umakfia, freezer, refrigerator. He says, see the following, and we're going to quote the following. Mumlatz l'rakez et kol mutzra chalav b'megira nifredot. You should keep dairy products in a separate drawer or a special container. Kedei laftiach shlo yitaftefu chalav o matzrav le'ever shar ma'acholim b'kelim sheb'mekarer. So he advises to leave your milk sticks material in a separate drawer or container so that there won't be drops. Chovali tragel. It's important to practice yourself. Also, be careful when you put things on the upper shelves of a refrigerator if they're uncovered, because it'll drip down. And the same thing, if you have exposed food on the bottom, something may drop on it. By the way, this is a nice example of a clear difference in halacha between Ashkenazim and Sfardim. There are many, but there's not that many. But this is clearly one where there's a complete different set of korot based on what we have the Ramah and what the Shulchan Aruch the Marah.
I'm surprised that they're pretty lenient on putting milchik and inflation next to each other or on top of each other, even if they're open. Right?
Well, remember, because the Shulchan Aruch paskin that there was no concern because people are stringent and they're going to be careful that they're going to not fall one to the other. That's what the Shulchan Aruch.
Okay.
Even those who do not place dairy meat products in different sections of the refrigerator should be careful to ensure that spills involving meat and dairy do not occur in the refrigerator, freezer, and if they do, to clean them up so that meat and dairy do not accidentally get mixed up. Okay, page 86. Very important sugya regarding bread. Another rabbinic rule that was instituted to prevent mistaken violation of Bossor B'Chalav is the gzeira about dairy bread. Chazal decreed that one may not bake bread that contains either dairy or meat ingredients. It means you can't have fleishik bread, you can't have milchik bread. Bread has to be part. And we learn that from the Gemara in Pesachim. The reason, as Rashi explains, is to ensure that one does not mistakenly consume bread, which is usually pariv, together with food of the other type. Says the Gemara in Masechta Pesachim Daf Lamed Vav, Ki da'amar Rabbi Yoshua livnei. This is what Rabbi Yoshua said to his sons. Yoim hakamo lo talushu li b'chalva. So on the first day of Pesach, don't knead dough with milk. From then on, you can do it. You're never allowed to knead dough with milk. If you do so, the bread is osur. So how could he say that? How could he advise them to knead the dough with milk after the first night of Pesach? Because they were going to shape the bread in the shape of an ox. They were going to give the bread a certain tzura, certain shape, so it would be a hecker, so they would know that it's special bread. So the conclusion of the Gemara indicates that there's an exception to the rule. That is, if it's baked like an ox's eye. However, Rishonim dispute the interpretation of this. According to Rashi, it refers to a case where one bakes bread that is small in size, like the eye of an ox. Not that it's shaped like the eye of an ox, but it's very small, such that it will be eaten shortly thereafter. And there's no concern that one may come to eat it with another type of food, because you can consume it right then and there. That's the concept of the eye of an ox, because it's small. Says Rashi, Ke'ein Tzurba Ma'at, Ke'ayin Shel Shor, small, like an ox's eye. Then Mutter Lolush B'Chalav. Why, says Rashi? Because you eat it right away. And there's no worry that you're going to eat it with something else. He's not going to wait around, and this piece is going to be, that was kneaded with milk, is going to be eaten with something else. However, the Rambam interprets...
Bernie?
Yes.
Come on, Bernie. How big is an ox's eye compared to a human eye or any other eye?
We're talking about a bilkala, like not a big loaf.
We first learned to do surgery on the eyes of a pig. They're about the same size as a human eye.
Human.
So
and it's a strange shear that the Gemara is giving. I'm just pointing out the strangeness of this.
Right. So the Rambam interpreted to mean that one formed the bread with a distinguishing feature. Says the Rambam, Ein Loshin Ha'isa B'Chol. You may not do it. V'im Losh, if you did it, Kol HaPas Asur Neher G'Laveir. You're going to get into a habit, so it's Asur. We asur that bread. The bread cannot be eaten. The bread's treif. You got to throw the bread away.
Yeah, Ernie, when they say bread, do they mean any dough? Or if you take challah and... Because
so when you make a challah, you're baking challah and you put milk in your ingredient as part of the yeast and water and all that.
Okay, but if you're making a dough, milachik, to be, let's say, some sort of cake, there's no problem with that because you're not taking challah from it.
Right, that's not bread.
That's
not
different.
bread.
Okay.
It's a machloikas, by the way.
And we're going to see some of that tonight.
About if you're using dough for cookies, it's all of that. There is
because like a brioche, it's dairy. It looks like a bread.
So we'll see. We'll see. Yeah. Let's wait for the shear to progress.
Okay. All right.
Let's wait for the shear to progress. So says the Rambam, Shema Yochel Babosor, the imshina b'tzuras apas, achetiani keres arezemuter. So we're going to see. We all are familiar with Schwartz's Bakery. There used to be a section where they had certain things that were shaped in a triangle or shaped. There was a certain shape, particularly right near Shavuos, where people bought milachdik breads, where it had a different surah. And we're going to see how that halacha developed. So the Shulchan Aruch accepts both leniencies, both of Rashi and the Rambam. He says, "Ein lo shenisa b'chalav." Look, you shouldn't knead the dough when you're baking bread with milk. Shema yavu la'achlem abasar. V'im losh, if you did it, kol hapas aser. Afilu la'achal levada. It's aser. You can't eat the piece of bread by itself. The bread becomes aser as a gzer midrabban. V'im hayad over mu'et, but if it's small, kedei achila b'vas achas, so it's going to be a small amount that you could eat at one time. O sheshina tzuras hapas. or you changed the shape. And you'll identify when you see that shape, oh, I can't eat meat with this because this is a milchtik thing, mutter. So then it's permitted. You can't bake a bread in an oven that they greased the sides of the inside of the oven with fleishik fat, because the bread, the blias of that fat is going to go into the bread. The flavor is going to go into the bread. The mafod, and if you did it, dino ki isa shnei Tzurba B'Chalav, it's vice versa. It becomes a fleishik bread, which has the same din. It's usher, just like if you baked it with milk. Says the Ramah, so they did bake bread for Shavuos with milk. Gam b'shum l'koved Shabbos. Now, and there were people who baked bread with animal fat for Shabbos. He calls them a chashiv kedavar mu'it, but because it was considered a small amount. Gam kitziras mishun misharpas. So they baked it in a way that was much smaller, and they baked it with a different shape.
Is that fleishik bread if they smeared that on?
Yeah, it was fleishik bread. But again, they made it small, and they made it with a different shape, l'koved Shabbos. We're not used to that, but in following the Rambam, the Shulchan Aruch defines the amount of davar mu'it is a small amount as being the size that one could eat at one time, like at one meal. The Pri Megadim suggests that this issue is actually subject to a dispute between the Shulchan Aruch and Ramah. And according to the Ramah, the minimum size is the amount that would be eaten over one whole day, not just one meal. That's why he said l'koved Shabbos, the whole day of Shabbos, right? Umad Ramuit, Shulchan Aruch mashma b'kedei achila b'vasachas, and then the Torah's Chatas. The Torah's Chatas was another halachic sefer that the Ramah wrote. Klau kol liyoma havidavar mu'it. That if it can be eaten in one day, that's considered a davar mu'it. So, and this approach of the Pri Megadim is accepted as halacha for Ashkenazim by the Sefer HaKashrus. Osru chacham lefos lechem b'chalav b'chema. You can't use butter or milk. B'chashash shema yavo lechem bossor. Vu adin shlo lefos lechem b'shumin b'sari, not with fleishik fat. Afilu shalot, even chicken. Mechashash lachilasom gvina v'chala. Because of a worry, you're going to eat it with the opposite crop, the opposite thing. Except with the following criteria. Got to have a different shape. It's recognizable from the bread that it's dairy or meat. He says that's the basis. I'm reading the footnote. That's why pizza, cheesecake, and similar dishes made with dough are not problematic. And as it is clear from looking at the food from the top that it contains cheese. So if you want to make your pizza dough with milchik, that's one of the exceptions. You could do it. I don't know if they do it, but you could do it because you see right away that it's a milchik thing. In addition, according to an article by Rabbi Eli Gersten on the OU website, the OU holds that even pizza without cheese would be permitted to bake with dairy ingredients in the dough, since the pizza shape should alert one that it may be dairy. And the same is true for calzones and other types of food. That's what Rabbi Gersten says.
What about croissants? Aren't they made with butter croissants?
Then he says like this. We find in Israel that commercially made potato barekas, which are parve, have a square shape. Right. While cheese barekas, which are dairy, have a different triangular shape. I remember learning in Yordeya this issue of triangle, that there was a minig, whatever, that these things on Shavuos were made triangular shape. Weiter in the Sefer HaKashrus, there also has to be where it's all going to be eaten up. Livnei Sfarad Baruch Achas, one meal. So it can't be a huge loaf. It's got to be something that would be eaten up that day. That's part of the criteria that we said that you'd be allowed to do. Now the Pischei Tshuva, by the way, the Pischei Tshuva lived in the 1800s, and Remember, the Mishnah Brura is only the Chofetz Chaim, who passed away in 1933. He wrote his commentary only on Orach Chaim. And what was the Mishnah Brura's function? Because from the time of the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah lived in Krakow in like 1650, there were like 300 years that went by where there was the Levush and the Eliyahu Rabbah and so many other poskim in that period of 200 years. So the Mishnah, if you look at the Mishnah Brura, he always is summarizing from this posuk, this posuk in the interim between the Ramah and his day. And that's why today we follow the Mishnah Brura, because he summed up all of the various other inventions in the 1800s, if there was something new that came out, refrigerators or ice boxes. There are things that the Mishnah Brura wrote already, which there was some modern things which other poskim, as well as he, had commented on. So he gathered all of that and put it down in the Mishnah Brura. The Pischei Tshuva did the same thing for the rest of Shulchan Aruch, except he was like 100 years before. He was like 1850, 1860. So if you look in Yoreh Deah, he has done the same function. He's brought a lot of other poskim, like the Chassam Sofer, Rabbi Kiva Eger, and he'll have been malakate a lot of other poskim to bring whatever halacha was up to his day. Okay? For example, in today's world, there's a Rav who wrote the Badei HaShulchan. He lives in Borough Park. He's still alive. And the Badei HaShulchan is like, he is caught up in, at least in Yoreh Deah issues, from the time of the Pischei Tshuva until now. And that's why the Badei HaShulchan, we're going to quote the Badei HaShulchan a number of places, because he's even a more up-to-date version of the Pischei Tshuva. But that's why you've seen us quote the Pischei Tshuva a lot, because the Pischei Tshuva is like the Mishnah Brura on Yoreh Deah, in a sense. There is no Mishnah Brura on Yoreh Deah. He only wrote it on Orach Chaim. So the Pischei Tshuva notes that once the bread is already baked, if it's too big to be eaten at one time or in one day for Ashkenazim, one no longer has permission to divide it up into smaller pieces to give out to individuals. Remember, we said it's osur. It's a gzeira. If you bake a big loaf, it's osur. You can't break it up and say, oh, these are smaller pieces. It had to be baked that way. Likewise, one may no longer change the form of the bread once it's baked. It's got to be baked that way. This is because the moment that it was baked, it already becomes forbidden. Says the Pischei Tshuva, V'ayin chavis das, shekosav od, Yeshinu ein moyel, rak yeshina b'shas afiyah. This shape change has to occur when you bake it. The lo haya alav isser klal. At that moment, there's no isser. Never had an isser. Well, if you bake a bread in a normal shape, normal size, it's a dvar isser at that point. You can't change it. If you baked it small and you baked it in a certain shape, no isser ever attached. To now do a shinu post facto, post baking, it doesn't help. Maybe you want to give it out to a lot of people. That's usher. When in your day, when we say nasa nevela, it means it becomes usher. It's like a shtick isser. It's like a piece of chazer. So when Chazal say it's usher, when the Chacham say it's usher, it's usher. Ayin Shah. V'chein dasa Prima Godim. Right? The Prima Godim was also one of the later commentaries, way after the Ramah. So the Pischei Tshuva is summarizing. But the low kafter v'ferach, b'shem skenu, but not like the kafter v'ferach citing his grandfather. I'm just going to read the footnote. According to this, inserting a sticker into the bread, certifying that the bread is dairy, would not seem to be sufficient to permit it. This is the opinion of most kashrus organizations today. However, Rav Soloveitchik felt that this was permissible, and this ruling was followed by some in the previous generation. Then he says, in addition, see that article for more important halachic issues related to dairy bread that are beyond the purview of the shir, including dairy bread baked in a bakery, certifying cinnamon bread and raisin bread as dairy English muffins, and making challah for Shabbos in a meat oven. So there's an article by Rab Levitz by Rabbi Leibovitz, halachically speaking, where you could follow some of those things. So Harold, you had questions about brioches and this like that. So you can see there's a lot written on this subject. All these specialty things that were made.
Ernie, is that the same reason that pasakum is that people are machmir not to eat pasakum because you don't know if they're putting milk products in it?
No,
Is that a different issue completely?
Pasakum is a different gzeira. It's a gzeira because of chavrus, because of nesuyin.
Like drinking wine together?
That's people that pasakum and pasgvina and yain nesach. So pasakum is not related to this gzeira. It's related to something else.
Ernie, how about
now hang on. 1 second, David. Remember, Bernie, pasakum, we're not most, except for those that are machmir, to only eat pas Yisrael. So there are pasakums, old country bread, other breads that have hashgacha. The only time is between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. The Shulchan Aruch says that in those period of time, you should be machmir not to eat pas palter and only eat pas Yisrael. Now there are people who are machmir only eat pas Yisrael the whole year, but pas akum isn't treif. For example, as gvina akum is more stringent. We don't eat gvina akum, but we do eat. Some people eat pas akum. Those that are not machmir to eat pas Yisrael, similar to cholav Yisrael. Some are machmir, but those things not become an isser. Here, Bernie, this bread when you knead with dairy becomes asr legamri. David, what did you want to say?
No, I wonder what's that halacha in a dairy restaurant. Are they allowed to do milchik bread? There is no chashash there.
You would think that they're not serving anything except milk, right?
Right.
Yeah, but the thing is like this. The thing is like this. So you want to say that even if they bake a big loaf of bread, there's not going to be an isser? I'm not sure that's going to be noisy. It's a very good point. It's a very good point. But I don't see that we learned tonight that there would be a permission for that. We would have to ask one of the certifying organizations about that question you just asked. Would be a great question. What would be in a dairy restaurant, since there's no chashash, there's no chashash because they're not serving meat. Okay, so that's a very good question. Well, that's something where we can ask one of the certifiers in Los Angeles, like Rabbi, the guy in the valley. What's his name? What's the kashrus expert? Yeah, Rabbi Eidlitz. That would be a good person to ask.
If they will ask me, I will say that you are allowed, because it's no chashash.
No, ask Milky Way.
But by the way, David, you see here that according to most of these poskim, even if you certify the bread as dairy, with a sticker, like let's say remember they used to put a plumba on a piece of chicken. But no, because remember, Sydney, the problem with the certifying on bread is if you put it on the outside container and you take the bread out of the outside container, no one's going to know what it is. But let's say you had some kind of certifying thing, like a ring in a bread. But
they used to put a sticker on the challah too. They used to put a sticker on the challah too.
Mizono.
That said what?
I don't know.
Sydney, when you say a sticker, what they would?
In Israel, they had.
I don't remember. I just remember they had like little stickers on challahs too.
I remember.
But you see, we don't know. The halacha doesn't allow. Halacha doesn't rely on the sticker, on the certifying to say whether it's there. It doesn't allow it. David has a different shaila regarding the problem is like this. If you bake bread and it goes out somewhere else, who's going to know? That means, who knows? That, these days when they get from La Brea Bakery or Cabrera Bakery, and it comes from a central bakery, there'd be a problem. Well, English muffins is shaped a certain way. People might think that that's a dairy thing because it's small, you did it one time. That might fulfill the criteria. Now, the Pischei Tshuva also states that the prohibition of eating dairy bread applies even if the milk accidentally spilled into the bread. You didn't do it lechatchila, or one mistakenly baked it with bread, except when you did it in one of the permitted manners. The reason is that the prohibition is not a penalty for an intentional violation. Like if you cook the mazid on Shabbos, we ask you can never benefit from that. that's a prohibition as a penalty for an intentional violation. But that's not what the Gzeira here is about. It's rather due to a concern that perhaps this bread will be eaten with meat and dairy together. Says the Piskei Tshuva, "V'ayin prima godim shekosav the yesh la'ayin." We need to investigate. In lash pasim chalav b'shogeg. You didn't put the milk in on purpose. It fell in. Shelo yodesh is a osir, right? Or for example, a real shogeg. Person, a balabusta doesn't know that it's prohibited to make bread with milchiks, and she used milk. Oh, nafal b'shogeg, however, something fell in. He wants to say mi osir. Is it osir or not? Or lokon, so maybe we didn't make it gzeira there. Ki yemecha shavar b'mezid. Umistimas aposkim. The fact that the poskim didn't say anything about it. That's what stimas aposkim means. Means they didn't say b'med dvarim amurim when this and this and this. No, they said their halacha blanketly. Mashma says the Prima Godim after shogeg osir. So we can see it's a very stringent halacha here. Now, does this prohibition of dairy and bread? Yes.
So that means that in every bakery that's certified by whoever the OU, they have to have a mashgiach tamidi, because all the bakeries they bake milk and meat together. They bake milk and parov together. They bake it in the same bakery. So if you are so worried it falls in and all this kind of thing, how come there's not a mashgiach tamidi in all the bakeries?
Well, so remember, first of all, in order for the bakery to make a milchtik bread, they have to follow this criteria. It's got to be small. It's got to be shaped in a triangle. So the mashgiach will come by and see that this bread is being baked. It's being baked the right way, and they put it in a certain area where they sell it. And that's it. And that's what the mashgiach has to determine.
No, but the last thing we talked about is in case it falls in, there's something falls in. We don't know when in a bakery so how come they allow? If we sell makpid on that kind of thing, we makpid on milk and meat, and it has to be a different shape. So how come they're not mashgichim tmidim in the bakeries to make sure that?
Well, so we're going to learn. So I think we're going to learn the concept of hashgacha by the difference between meat and milk. That means what kind of hashgacha do you need when you're operating with meat? Well, that will come. That's a sugya of hashgacha. I think it's an interesting question. And there are reasons why there's leniencies regarding this as opposed to in the other case. But again, I think very good question as to why we don't need that. But it comes in a different sugya in your day.
Ernie, the same question. The question would probably apply to Thomas's English muffins, right?
Yeah, well, someone said, so that's in that article. It says he specifically talks about dairy English muffins because and it's beyond the purview of this year. We can, if next time I didn't print out that volume 4 issue 13, but we can do so because I see people have questions regarding that, and we can find out a little bit. But there are ways to be matir that, because the OU I know gives hashgacha on the Thomas English muffins.
Yeah, it's OUD.
Probably because it's small. It's got a very particular shape, and that's so it meets the criteria that we said. The bread has a different and unique form, and when all the bread will be in at one time in the course of one day.
Right, but you're gonna. It's also a sealed unit, which says on the outside you can seal it. It's not like a sticker. You seal it. It's sealed on the outside. It says OUD. So it has a difference on it.
I know, but we said, Walter.
But once you take it out of the package,
we said inserting a sticker even into the bread, certifying that the bread is dairy, would not be sufficient to permit it. And that's
but this is not putting it into the bread. This is
that's even worse. So that's even worse. That means putting it into the bread is better because it stays with the bread. That's why I mentioned the concept of a plumba. Because remember, the plumba stayed with the chicken, with the meat. It was like an earring. You have to pull it out. So then there's no skullduggery. But if you just have something on the outside, that's why the chumrah is
look like a
that
bread
even if the certifying sticker is on the bread, we didn't matter it.
Yeah, but
okay.
I think
that has to be a different shape.
English muffin today doesn't look like a piece of bread. It looks like that eye of whatever they were talking about. It's round.
Exactly. I think it meets the criteria. Okay. Does the prohibition of dairy bread apply as well to other foods not made with dough that are generally eaten with both dairy and meat? Like what? Spices, ketchup, right? People put ketchup on macaroni and cheese. People put ketchup on pizza. People put ketchup on French fries with, fleishik French fries. Are these kind of neutral things which can be eaten with both? Do we have to be careful and make sure that ketchup and spices are not, cannot be made with those things? According to the Taz, in fact, one may not add dairy to them due to the same concern that people will assume it is part of. But many other achronim, such as the Aruch HaShulchan, the Minchas Yaakov, the Chachmas Adam, hold that the halach of dairy bread only applies to bread. Aruch HaShulchan passed away in 1910. Aruch HaShulchan was like a Mishnah Berurah on all four halakim of Shulchan Aruch. So we have the Aruch HaShulchan everywhere. So in Lisho Lama Pasakli B'Siman HaKoidem, B'Tznon, right? Tznon is a radish, which in halachic terms is considered a davar charif, something spice. Shechotchu b'sakin shel basar. So there we're going to learn later on in the Sugi of Taruvas that if you have a meat knife, what's a meat knife? A knife that you use to cut meat. So there's blias, there is absorption of the meat into the knife. Now, we're going to learn at length these dinim that normally beyond 24 hours, a blia in something becomes livgam. It means the flavor that it absorbed goes away. So that in certain cases, if you used a kli that was a fleisha kli, but it's beyond 24 hours when you didn't cook it with meat, there's room to be lenient. But by a knife, we have a concept of duchka de sakina, the sharpness of the knife and the pressure. In that situation, there's something called mechala l'shvach, that when you cut something, especially a davar charif, even if the knife had not been used with meat for 2 weeks ago, it revives the blia. That's why the Aruch HaShulchan is pointing out to us that he said if you cut a radish with a fleishik dika knife, Asr L'Achla B'Chalav, you can't eat that radish with milk because the blias of the meat went into the radish. Therefore, you can't eat the radish with something milk. V'chein b'tavlin shenidochu b'meducha shel basar she'asr l'achlan b'chalav. Let's say you took your pepper and you grinded your pepper with a grinder, but it was a fleishik grinder. You had used meat with it, and it had a bli of it. So you would not be able to use those spices with milk. Ubasar mutter, the lok gazrin and shema yavo la'achlan b'chalav. How come then you can't eat with, but you can use those spices with meat? Why didn't we make a gzeira and say the whole peppers are usher like we did with bread? Says the Aruch HaShulchan, right? We said if you grounded pepper with a fleishik dika pestle, you could use it with meat. You couldn't use it with milk, but you could use it with meat. So he says, why didn't we make a gzeira like we do by bread and say if you used a fleishik or a milchtik grinder with the pepper, it should be usher, just like we said the bread is usher. He says the pas shiny. Man lives by bread alone. Since bread is the staff of life, it's something that you eat almost with every meal, etc. He didn't know about low-carb diets in the United States, right? Bread was the staple of every meal. So in that, they were not goyzer other foods that if you made them with some kind of implement that was not that was fleishik or milchik, were not goyzer that the whole thing is also. According to the Aruch HaShulchan, the rule that dairy bread is totally forbidden, and not just forbidden to be eaten with meat, is unique to bread, since bread is the mainstay of the diet. Therefore, it's more likely that people may eat it with the wrong type of food, and it's given a special status. Another important kula, leniency, within the halach of dairy bread is that it does not apply to foods that are generally not eaten with meat, such as sweet pastries. Says the Yalkut Yosef, Aval Pishazu Chazal Lush Isa B'Chalav, Pen Yavel Lechol Apasim Bossor, Mikol Mokum Mutter Lelosh Isa Shel Uga Metuka B'Sukarim Chalav Uchama. You can bake a cake and use butter and milk with it. Shein Derech Lechol Ima Tavshin Shel Bossor Mepnei Metukuta. You don't eat a piece of angel food cake or chocolate cake with a piece of meat. You can make chocolate with milk or butter. You have to inform the consumer that it's made dairy. Okay. Let's go to page 91. Leftover bread and separate tablecloths. Eating leftover bread from a meat meal with dairy. This comes up very commonly. You have a big Shabbos meal. You have challah on your table, and there's leftover challah. And it was sitting on your fleishik at the table. Can that bread be eaten with milk? So, in addition to the law of not baking bread with dairy or meat ingredients, there's a prohibition of eating bread that was already served at a meat meal with dairy. This halacha is first mentioned in Talmud Yerushalmi. Amar Rav Yusa, Hahin de oichel chovetz, one who ate cheese, uvedaite mechol koiped tzarach mevar pisas, and he wants to eat meat. He first has to get rid of the piece. The pisas is a piece. The question is, what is that piece of? The Beis Yosef quotes Dagos Oshri, who applies this passage from the Yerushalmi as follows. Remember, the Beis Yosef is the Rav Yosef Karo, who wrote the Beis Yosef as a commentary on the Torah. So he says, the Hagos Oshri is a Rishon. Because of Hagos Oshri, in the name of the Or Zarua, was also a Rishon. Mitzvah ben Amuvchar, Hecha she'achal gvina, the person wants to eat cheese. Rotze lechol basar, now he wants to eat meat. Tzarich lavir me'al ha'shulchan halechem, v'chol ha'meichel she'alu magvina. If you want to eat meat, you got to get rid of all the stuff that you ate with the cheese. So he brings this first concept that if there was bread on the table of a milk meal, you cannot eat it when later on you eat meat. By the way, there's a nice biography of the Or Zarua. Although the Hagos Oshri refers to removing bread as well as other foods from the table, the Shulchan Aruch cites this halacha specifically regarding bread. Mi shachal gvina, rotze lechol basar, tzarich levar me'al hashulchan shiurei pasha achlu magvina. You got to get rid of the bread. If you can eat meat with it, you can eat meat on the same table. Make sure there's no bread that was there on the table when you ate cheese. The Sefer HaKashrus adds that if the bread was cut with a parve knife and did not touch other foods, one may eat it during a meal of the other type. So lechem shenoter la'achar sudas b'sarit. You have leftover bread from a meat meal. Asr b'achila barucha chalavit. You may not eat that bread with a milchtik meal. So you got to keep that bread somehow in a different box, labeled fleishik, so you know that you can't eat it with dairy. V'hu adin b'shari lechem arucha chalavit l'tzorach achilas b'sarit. Same thing. If you had a brunch and it was milchtik and you had bread on it, you also have to make sure you identify that as bread that was eaten with milk, so you don't eat it with meat. However, there's a criteria that he says. Elim kein nifras alechem b'sakin parv. So if the bread was sliced specifically with a parv knife, and let's say you put the bread somewhere where it wouldn't mix with the other foods, then you check the bread to make sure there's no flecks or something there. So he gives you a kula here. So let's say your makpid that when you cut your challah, you only use it a part of challah knife. You don't use it for anything fleishik or melachik, and that becomes your part of knife. But you got to make sure that your bread is kept somewhere different from the rest of the food. keep it in a bread basket, keep it somewhere else. Otherwise, if it's just lying on the table, that bread is a problem. The same thing we had Pesach. Hang on. Same thing we had Pesach. We had like milchtik lunches, and we'd have the shmura matzah, and there were a lot of pieces of shmura matzah left over. In that case, certainly you've got it. There's no knife. If food is all over the place, either you have to put it in a separate box. Make sure you knew that was a chalavi box, and that way you could use the excess shmura matzah for another meal as long as it was a milchtik meal. What were you saying, Walter?
No, it was me. It was Bernie. I was going to say to you that our usual custom on Shabbos is to put the large challah on a challah board and use a knife that's specific to just cutting challah. Right. After that, what's left over, the large part that nobody consumes, we want to eat it during the week. We put it away in a cabinet.
Fine.
So even on the table the whole time, nothing's been used on it except for a parva knife that's used exclusively for challah.
Right. So because you put that, let's say you cut half the challah and the other half you already removed from the table, you meet the criteria for sure. He said, make sure it's not with the other machalim and make sure you use a parv knife. But Bernie, the pieces of bread that you got flown around on the table, that would be problematic. You couldn't gather those up, because that would be already considered bread that was eaten with the other foods.
Right, and your matzah on Pesach is a much more realistic concern.
Ernie,
yes,
I have a very strong shaila. The chura in matzah, it's the same halacha as lechem, that you are not allowed to do milchik matzah, right?
Correct. Correct.
Now, okay, so what is matzah ashira? Mei perot, or chalav, or shemen?
Cool. So first of all, matzah, we hold matzah shira. We don't only give that to sick people.
But you are allowed to eat matzah shira. You are not allowed. You are not yotzei b'dei mitzvat matzah. But how can you allow if it's
why don't we goizer? Why aren't we goizer?
Like lechem.
Since we made it with milk, it should be osur like this. Must be. Maybe they make it with a different shape. They're smaller.
Wait. I never heard of matzah shira as being qualified with milk. Yes, oil, yes, oil, yes, eggs, yes to fruit juice, but I never heard of matzah shira being made with milk.
Oh, sure.
It would be osur. L'chor David would be osur.
Matzah shira is either mei perot, milk, or shemen or oil.
Where does it say milk? Where does it say give it?
I'm telling you, it's dvorim hayiduim.
No, milk, l'chor. So David,
some other form of liquid. I've never seen anywhere in the halacha that defines matzah shira as milk being included. I think it's yedua. You don't make it with milk.
Yeah. I will Google it.
Anyways, it's a very good question. I would say maybe they make it with a different shape, and they make it smaller or something like that. But in Hanami, it's a good question. But this heter of the Sefer Kashrus is important. Now says the Igros Moshe. Rav Moshe Feinstein limits this halacha specifically to a small piece of bread, not to a loaf of bread, or a much larger piece of it that was on the table. As in that case, one is careful to make sure it did not touch any of the dairy foods on the table. So Rav Moshe was lenient here and said only a big piece would not be osur. Only small little pieces that you cut. Says the Igros Moshe. Small pieces. You're not careful. You ate it with the cheese. Maybe you'll say you can't. We can't rely on that. The big piece of the loaf, people are careful, like Bernie said. So Rav Moshe clearly was lenient. Now, does this halacha of not eating leftover bread from a meat meal at a dairy meal apply to other parv foods as well? For example, may one serve leftovers from a salad or parv noodles served at a meat meal on Shabbos, at a dairy meal on Sunday? Again, not bread, Remember, we tried to ask about ketchup and salt. Here we're asking other than salad. You ate a salad at your meat meal. Or you had some noodles that were part. So as we saw, although the Hagos Oshri does mention other foods, the Shulchan Aruch did not. The Badei HaShulchan, remember, the Badei HaShulchan is living today in Borough Park, right? Addresses the question by saying it depends on the chances of whether the meat foods came into contact with, here he says the bread, but I think he means with the other material. What about other foods like salad that you ate in a meat meal? How did you take the salad from its plate? So if you're going to use your fork that you use for your meal, so he's saying, like, let's say you have your fork that you're eating your meat with, and you use that fork to remove the thing to your plate. Well, then that's a problem. You're worried that there was some meat stuck to your fork. Now you stuck it in the salad. So that's going to be a problem to use that salad with a dairy meal. Let's say the salad has a special salad, those salad tongs. Everyone, that's how we do it, right? So he matirs to use that salad. If you didn't use your own utensil, you used its own utensil, then technically you could use the salad for a dairy meal. He ends up saying that we should be machmir if we can. He's just saying, if it happened, it's not the end of the world. We will conclude this year with a halacha concerning using separate tablecloths, the source of which stems from the Rashba. The Rashba was a Rishon who lived in Barcelona, Spain, 1300. Susie and I had the opportunity of being in the shul of the Rashba in Barcelona. Maybe other people who visited Spain. It's an amazing place. The shutim of the Rashba there are many of them that are very applicable to Psak Halacha in America. Our tour guide, who was Professor Mark Shapiro, on the day we went to Barcelona, read off like 30 or 40 chidushim of the Rashba that we rely on in kashrus, all sorts of dinim. And this is an example of it. Concerning separate tablecloths. This stems from the Rashba. According to the Rashba, one may not eat dairy on a tablecloth that was previously used to eat meat, since there's likely actual meat residue on the tablecloth. Adar nearly barur. She'asur lechol gvina mapa she'achlo basar. V'chein lechol basar mapa she'achlo gvina, vice versa. You can't have a tablecloth without some drops of meat there. He's not talking here about blias. We're not talking like we talked about the knife or a kli that is bolea flavor. No. He's talking about mamoshus. He's talking about actual pieces. Because in order for a knife or a kli to absorb a flavor, it only happens through heat. If you put a cold piece of steak on a cold piece of plate, the plate does not become fleishik. All you do is hadacha, you rinse it off, and you're done. Because there is no transfer unless there's heat. Now, we're going to learn about malicha and kavush, salting something. So if you salt a piece of meat on a plate, there'll be blias. Or if you pickle it, if you kavush, salting, or malicha, so that's another way of transferring blias. So the Rashba is saying, we're not talking about blias here. He says, there are pieces of meat. Remember, this is Spain in 1300. He says, people would clean their knives with the tablecloth. They didn't have dishwashers, they didn't have housekeepers, so that's what they did. The Shulchan Aruch, of course, codified the ruling of the Rashba. And the Ramah reminded the Radbaz notes, though, that the Rashba was referring to situations where the meat and dairy foods were placed directly on the tablecloth. They weren't using plates. It's like if you've ever gone to one of those Arabic restaurants, they just put the food on a table and you eat it with your hands. In that case, there's concern that perhaps the two types of food will come in contact. But, says the Radbaz, if plates are used and the foods never touch the tablecloth directly, it's permitted to reuse the tablecloth for another type of food. And that's how the Yalkut Yosef paskins. Ayin ma shekosov Radbaz, shekosov she'ein divrei harav, that he's referring to the Rashba and the Shulchan Aruch, ela kishayu manichim ha-basar v'gvin ala mapa, not a plate. Vaz yesh lachu sham yidbeku zeh b'zeh. Aval minagenu lavi kol machil al shulchan b'ka'arot. We bring our food with plates. Hilkaf, afilu lotzes yidei chunas ha-Rashba, v'hipuch ha-machal l'chudu v'asher zaptichin sagi v'chei nagu. So you just clean it or reverse it, right? You reverse the tablecloth and remove the pieces. And that's the custom. Another possible approach for leniency is cleaning the tablecloth. If the tablecloth is thoroughly cleaned between meals, then it may be used for meat and then later for dairy. It would certainly be permitted to wash the tablecloth in the laundry between meals and reuse for the other type. And Rav Binyamin Forst, in the laws of Kashrus, summarizes the halachos related to tablecloth and concludes that despite the leniencies, many have the custom to use separate tablecloths for meat and dairy. One may not eat dairy on a tablecloth used for meat meal, since meat residue remaining on the cloth may touch the dairy food. Most authorities do not differentiate between foods eaten directly on the cloth and those eaten only on plates. One need not, however, keep separate tablecloths for meat and dairy. A tablecloth used for meat may be thoroughly washed and then used for dairy. Nevertheless, some have the minhag of using separate tablecloths for each type. Halachically, one is permitted to eat both meat and dairy cold meals directly on the table. You don't need a tablecloth, provided that one wipes the table clean. So if you have a glass table or any table without a tablecloth, you can eat milk and dairy on that table as long as you clean it thoroughly between the meals. Similarly, a plastic tablecloth may be wiped and cleaned of any residue and reused for dairy. Nevertheless, common custom is not to eat meat there on the same table or plastic tablecloth surface. So you see, there's din, and then there's chumras beyond the din. Many of our wives have chumras that they've learned from their mothers and grandmothers, and we shouldn't waver from that because that's minhag Yisrael Torah. So we've learned me'ikar din, what the dinim are. And then, of course, people have their own customs, and of course, they should not be mashana from those customs. So we finished Bossor B'Chalav. We've just sort of put our finger in it. It's going to come back when we learn taruvis, general mixtures of prohibited things. So, it'll be back, but we covered a lot of ground, I think.